Good day, everyone, and welcome to another Wellness Wednesday. Today, we'll be taking a break from your normal exercise session and we'll be looking at something a bit different. We'll be looking at mental health. But before we get into it, let me introduce you to who we have here on the panel. We are the Computer Hardware Information Processing and Specialist Club, or CHIPS. I am the president of CHIPS, Adrian Smith, and today I have with me
the Vice President of Academics, Imani Adonis.
I am the CHIPS chaplain, and I am Damario Lennox.
All right, so now that we're formally acquainted, we'll be looking at mental health. So I'll now turn over to Imani, and we'll be looking at some topics on mental health.
So we're going to kick things off this today with speaking about what is mental health. But before we actually get to the definition of what it actually is, how it affects people, we need to know why it is so important for us to discuss. And according to the World Health Organization, the WHO, in recent years, there has been increasing acknowledgement of the important role that mental health actually plays in achieving global development goals, as illustrated by the inclusion of mental health in the Sustainable Development Goals. What we see is that depression is actually one of the leading causes of disability. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among 15 to 29-year-olds, and that's our university population in a nutshell. People with severe mental health conditions actually die prematurely as much as 2 decades early due to preventable physical conditions. So I think this is a really important topic that we ought to be looking at. It should not be ignored at all. So we're going to start off this afternoon by looking at what is mental health.
Well, for me, I think that mental health is a state of being. It is you coming to the realization of what you're capable of doing. If you are able to maneuver a certain task under vast pressure and basically coming out on top. But that's just my 2 cents. Adrian, what do you think it is?
Well, as somebody who struggles with mental health in these times as well, it's a very difficult topic to touch on. The definition for me, I would go for just what you feel, not necessarily the anxiety and the depression, but sometimes it's unexplainable and you don't really know how to piece it together. But, in a nutshell, it's that deep, dark feeling that sometimes you do feel when you're lost and you have nowhere to go.
And I just want to add to that. I would say that mental health is essentially the aggregate, the complete sum of all other facets of health within a person. If your physical health isn't bad, your mental health is not going to be in good shape. If your spiritual health is something that is not up to par, your mental health will also suffer, as well as your social health, and we can go on with all the different facets of health. It affects how we think, feel, and act. And according to the CDC, it plays an important role in how we manage stress, make decisions, and essentially relate to others. So that is the premise upon which we are building our discussion today. What is mental health? And now we're going to take a look at how do we identify if someone is suffering with mental health issues. Adrian?
Well, when somebody's suffering with mental health, you're not going to know all the time. We could be sitting here going through it and you'll just never know unless we tell you. So sometimes, or even most times, it's good to speak to your peers and let them know how you're feeling if you are the one that is going through mental health. Or even ask them how they feel and see if they're the ones that are struggling with their mental health. But, well, Mr. Lennox, what do you say?
Well, as Adrian said, it's not something that you can just quickly take up that say, hey, Adrian is going through mental health issues or Imani is going through mental health issues. It is actually something that you would have to realize over time. So if you know that the person is basically a vibrant person and they would usually come and greet you, yes, you might be having an off day and you might feel like, okay, I want to just isolate myself right now. But if this pattern becomes, frequent, then you know that, hey, probably this person is going through something. So basically, changing pattern could be a key factor in identifying if a person is facing mental health issues.
And to add to that as well, if I may, when somebody's going through mental health, sometimes they like to deny that feeling because, again, as I said, it's something that you can't really understand it on that degree of, okay, I'm sad, I'm depressed, this is mental health, it's happening to me. It's something that you have to gradually understand that, listen, this is something that I do go through, this is affecting me. Yes, Imani.
All right, so according to a reputable website, some of the issues, some of the challenges, some of the signs and symptoms that we see coming out of persons who are actually struggling with poor mental health, we see where they could be eating or sleeping either too much or too little. So we know that temperance is something that we should be looking out for. So if we see something in excess, that could be a sign that somebody is going through mental health. But then again, mental health issues, sorry. But then again, these signs and symptoms are not to be looked at or understood in isolation one of another. You can't just look and say, Adrian hasn't been eating as much, or Damario has been eating way too much. Something's going on with their mental health. No, they have to be understood together. So pulling away from people and usual activities, as Damario mentioned, having low or no energy, feeling numb or like nothing matters, as Adrian was alluding to, having unexplained aches and pains, feeling helpless or hopeless, substance abuse, smoking, drinking, or using drugs, feeling unusually confused, forgetful, on edge, angry, upset, worried, or scared, even yelling or fighting with family members and friends, experiencing severe mood swings, and having persistent thoughts and memories that you can't get out of your head, hearing voices or believing things that are not true, hallucinations, thinking of harming yourself or others, suicidal thoughts is a really big sign to look out for. And just the inability to perform daily tasks like taking care of your kids or getting to work or school or being able to actually function as in the role that you need to be functioning in. These are all signs and symptoms that somebody may be struggling with a mental health issue. And the next thing that we're going to touch on is how do we actually go about helping someone else cope with their mental health challenges, or how do we recognize within ourselves that these are some strategies, some steps that we can take to coping with our own mental health?
Well, with coping with mental health, I find that if you not necessarily speak to somebody that goes through mental health to have that understanding, but just opening up to somebody. The thoughts that we have inside of our minds, sometimes they can lead you to do things that you don't even want to do. So I'd advise that, sometimes you got to reach out to the Most High. You got to pray about it.
Amen.
A lot of people forget that that is an outlet as well when you don't have someone to speak to. As somebody who is an orphan, it's difficult to find somebody to speak to that is going through those issues. A lot of us as young adults, teenagers, and even little kids, they don't really speak to people that don't go through the same issues as themselves. So if that's the case, then reach out to God, pray about it, and
Right.
if you have somebody there, talk about it. Do not keep these thoughts within you.
Definitely. Damario?
Well, I would say that you should talk to someone about it, right? Now, for most of us, we don't confide in others. Like, we don't just get readily up and, hey, Imani, I'm going through some mental health issues. It's not like that for most of us. So if you do have someone that you can confide in, that you feel that is safe to speak with, then you can talk to that person. Mm-hmm. If it is a case that you don't have someone like that in your life, then a good way would be for you to just write it down. You could journal, or if you're not so fancy with the handwriting, you don't like to write physically, you just use a device. You have notepads on your device, you have Word on your laptop. You just jot it somewhere, get those feelings out into the atmosphere.
Correct.
Give your mind a safe place to rest.
And to add to that as well, that's a really interesting tip, because that's you letting it out. And with that, a lot of us that go through mental health, you'll find that most of them are introverts. They don't express themselves. So if you can at least find something, if it's to listen to music or, as you said, to write down your thoughts, that can help as well. That's amazing.
Quite so. So some of the tips that we're given is that we first have to understand that there's a difference, a major difference between poor mental health and an actual diagnosed mental illness. We're talking things like anxiety, depression. You can't just wake up one morning and say, hey, I'm anxious. I am depressed. These are things that we have to actually visit mental health professionals before we can self-diagnose ourselves with these conditions. Bear in mind, you might see some of the signs and symptoms, but that is just your cue to say, I need to visit my mental health professional. As Adrian mentioned, prayer. Prayer is very important. As I just touched on, getting professional help, therapists, psychologists. Even here on campus, we have our counseling center. These are persons that you can turn to, that you can tap into, resources to make sure that you are, better able to handle your mental health situations. As we've been seeing throughout the rest of our Wellness Wednesdays, we've been seeing lifestyle changes, proper nutrition, exercise, water, sunlight, temperance, air, rest, trust in God. For those of you who might not have caught on, I just use New Start. So that is something that we need to be looking out for when we're trying to learn how to cope with our mental health issues. In terms of temperance, we want to leave abusive substances alone. Temperance means to do and to use what is right in moderation and to never use or do anything that does our body harm. Things like alcohol, drugs, whether they're prescription or whether they're just hard illicit substances, stay away from them. They will not help. Get the necessary assistance that you need if it is that you're struggling with addiction to these things. We have to reach out to persons outside of ourselves. Of course, rest, taking time off from work or school as is necessary. If you're feeling like, you really can't manage it, don't be like the Energizer Bunny and keep going and keep going and keep going. No, you have to take some time off. And again, as Adrian was alluding to, trust in divine power. Verses like Philippians 4, verses 6-7, John 14:27, 1 Peter 5:7, and a lot more. These verses actually tell us that God doesn't want us to be in a place of poor mental health. He wishes above all things that we prosper and be in good health, and that includes our mental health. And career-specific things. We are from the Computer and Information Sciences Department, and as Demario mentioned earlier, sometimes you won't always have pen and paper to write. Type out your feelings on an actual device. We stand using those devices. Additionally, take breaks from social media. We do know how toxic these environments can get sometimes, and they are just not going to cut it if it is that you're struggling with self-esteem issues and so many other challenges. Take time off of your devices as well. You can't just sit staring at a computer or a phone from sunrise to sundown. You have to take breaks. Change your setting from time to time. Don't wake up in the morning and head straight to your computer desk. Working at home is the in thing now. Take some time to go outside, have your classes outside, do your work outside. Just take a walk around, just change your scenery from time to time. Don't isolate yourself from the persons around you. If you need someone to talk to them. Make friends with those around you. I know it can be a bit difficult for some of us, but make friends. Spend time with your family members. Don't push them away and say, I can handle this. I can handle this. Take time to speak to the persons around you.
That's so true. Before you continue, as Imani was telling you, don't be like the Energizer Bunny. Take time. It does take time. Do not rush into things. We want it to be over so quickly, but that's not the case. You have to gradually take time and build up your own self-esteem. Go at your own pace. You don't have to be like, say, if I'm going through it and Demario is going through it, Imani's going through it. Imani might cope with it a little bit better than me or Demario. So just take in your own stride. You can do amazing things, but you just have to take your time.
Right. So, any final comments from you, Demario?
Well, just to touch a little bit on what Adrian said, if I have a mental health disorder or issue and I function a certain way and I start to observe my environment and I realize that, hey, this person operates like me, then chances are that this person might be going through what I am going through. So I think a safe bet would be for you to, approach that person, find out what is going on. Because guess what? That person might be having a disorder that you may be able to help with. And who knows, maybe that person will be able to help you with your disorder. But caution, I'm not saying that you should find every person out there that has that issue, because it can make your situation worse.
Quite so.
But the aim is for you to reach out to them so that you and that person can get help.
Great. And so that's where we're going to be closing off on our mental health discussion for today. I want to thank my fellow panelists. This was a great discussion, I think. Our audience has been made the better for it. And remember, just as we close, take care of your mental health. Our frontal lobes is the seat of our decision making, and we want to keep that pathway clear and open for better decision making and also, above all, communication with our Heavenly Father. If these things are clogged, we are unable to function. We cannot function to the optimal method, to the optimal standard that we are called to. So we want to make sure that our mental health is up to par, and that's it from us here at CHIPS for Wellness Wednesday. We thank you for joining us, and we do implore you to go out there and take care of your mental health.